a woman's awakening begins not with a loud declaration, but with a quiet, internal shift. Running the park. It starts the moment she begins to truly see herself, not through the lens of others' expectations, but through the clarity of her own awareness. Awareness is the birthplace of transformation. Running through the park. It is the point at which she begins to question the stories she has been told, all her life stories about what she should do, how she should behave, and who she should be in order to be accepted, loved, or respected. These stories are often deeply rooted in culture, running through the tradition and society, passed down through generations like invisible threads woven into her identity. Through the park. But awakening begins the moment she sees those threads and decides to untangle them. Awareness is not just about knowing your name or your role. It is about recognizing your internal landscape. It is about understanding your emotions, your desires, your limits, and your boundaries. For many women, this kind of awareness was not encouraged. Instead, they were taught to put others first, to suppress their voice, to seek validation outside themselves. But when a woman awakens to her own inner truth, she begins to break this pattern. She realizes that her life is not a script written by others. It is a story that she has the right to write, edit, and rewrite as she grows. An aware woman starts observing her thoughts and behaviors. She begins to notice when she is pleasing others at the cost of her own peace. She becomes conscious of the times she says "I's" when she means no, and she begins to reclaim those no's with confidence. Awareness teaches her to sit with discomfort rather than avoid it, to ask difficult questions, and to face uncomfortable answers. This is not an easy journey. In fact, awareness often comes with pain. Pain from realizing how much time has been lost in self-doubt, how many dreams were abandoned, and how many opportunities were missed. But awareness also brings light, and that light begins to illuminate a path forward. With self-awareness comes responsibility. Once a woman knows her truth, she can no longer ignore it. She can no longer live a life that contradicts it. That's when the real change begins. She starts making different choices, not out of rebellion, but out of alignment. She starts creating space for herself in a world that once asked her to shrink. She begins to speak with honesty, walk with purpose, and live with integrity. Awareness turns her into her own guide. She becomes less reliant on approval and more anchored in her values. This transformation doesn't just affect her. It impacts everyone around her. Children raised by an aware woman learn the value of emotional honesty. Partners learn the power of equality and mutual respect. Running communities learn to see strength not as dominance, but as presence. In every environment she enters, she becomes a mirror. Her awareness challenges others to examine their own beliefs, behaviors, and blind spots. Not because she preaches, but because she embodies what it means to live with clarity. Self-awareness is not a destination, it's a lifelong practice. But it is also the foundation of all other forms of empowerment. Without it, confidence is hollow and freedom is fleeting. But with it, a woman becomes unstoppable. Not because she forces change, but because she becomes change. Her presence becomes a force that silently shifts dynamics, that questions the status quo, and that dares to envision something better. When a woman awakens through self-awareness, she doesn't just find herself, she begins to find her place in the world. And in doing so, she changes the world, one conscious step at a time. In the journey of awakening, one of the most powerful shifts that occurs in a woman is the transition from silent strength to vocal leadership. For generations, women have carried immense strength, often quiet and unnoticed. They have endured, supported, nurtured, and built with grace and resilience, even when the world offered little recognition in return. But there comes a point when silence is no longer a virtue, When a woman awakens, she realizes that her silence has not always been her choice. It was taught, expected, and in some cases, demanded. Her voice was muted not because she lacked wisdom, but because her wisdom was seen as a threat to systems that favored control over collaboration. When she begins to speak, it is not out of anger, but out of necessity. Awakening transforms her perception of leadership. She no longer sees leadership as a role granted by external authorities. She sees it as a responsibility to herself and others, a responsibility to stand in truth, to guide with compassion, and to speak with clarity. Her voice may have once trembled when she expressed her opinion, but now it carries weight not because it is loud, but because it is grounded in authenticity. She no longer waits to be invited to the table. She builds her own or opens a space for others to join. This is not about dominance. It's about presence. Vocal leadership doesn't always look like giving speeches or leading organizations. Sometimes it looks like setting boundaries, saying no to things that deplete her and yes to things that nourish her. It means having difficult conversations and choosing honesty over comfort. It means speaking up in rooms where her silence was once expected. Whether she is a mother, a teacher, a worker, or an entrepreneur, she understands that leadership begins wherever she is, with whatever voice she has. An awakened woman also understands the power of storytelling. She realizes that sharing her journey, her struggles, through the doubts, her victories, is not a sign of weakness, but a bridge that connects her to others through the path. Her voice becomes a lifeline for those who are still finding their own. She does not pretend to be perfect. She speaks from a place of lived experience. In doing so, she creates space for others to do the same. Vocal leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions, listening deeply, and leading by example. As she becomes more vocal, she also becomes more influential. Not in a way that seeks applause, but in a way that sparks change. Her courage to speak encourages others to step into their truth. She becomes a living example of what it means to lead from within, without manipulation, without ego, and without fear. Her voice becomes an instrument of transformation, not just for herself, but for the entire ecosystem she inhabits. Importantly, an awakened woman knows when to speak and when to listen. Her leadership is not performative, it is rooted in deep awareness and empathy. She understands that every voice matters, and she uses her own not to overshadow others, but to amplify what needs to be heard. In doing so, through the path, she creates environments where collaboration replaces competition, and where connection replaces isolation. This transition from silent strength to vocal leadership marks a powerful phase in a woman's awakening. Signals that she no longer underestimates her impact. She knows that the world is shaped by the voices that dare to speak, and she chooses to be one of them. In every word she speaks with intention, she sends a messaging that silence is no longer the measure of grace, and that leadership begins with the courage to be heard. Through her voice, the world begins to change. When a woman awakens, one of the first internal battles she must face is with the layers of cultural conditioning that have been placed upon her since birth. These are not just ideas passed down by family or society. They are deeply embedded frameworks that have shaped how she sees herself and her role in the world. These beliefs tell her what is acceptable, what is desirable, what is feminine, and what is not. Often, these messages are not direct, they are subtle, silent rules. They teach her to be small, to be agreeable, to prioritize others' comfort over her truth, and to measure her worth based on external validation. Through the path, awakening is the process of questioning and eventually breaking free from these invisible chains. This is not an act of rebellion in the angry sense. It is an act of returning to her natural state of wholeness. When she begins to challenge the narratives that once defined her, she discovers that much of what she believed was never really her choice. It was inherited, it was conditioned, and now she begins the difficult but liberating process of re-choosing. This time consciously, this time truthfully. She starts noticing how certain behaviors are praised while others are judged. A quiet woman is called graceful, but a vocal one is labeled difficult. A nurturing woman is seen as natural, but an ambitious one is seen as aggressive. These double standards ring through the park, once accepted without question, begin to appear as what they really are, tools of limitation. She no longer feels the need to conform to the version of womanhood that others have built for her. She begins building her own. This shedding of cultural conditioning is often painful. It can lead to moments of doubt, confusion, even guilt. She may be misunderstood by those closest to her. Family and friends may resist her change, not because they mean harm through the park, because her transformation challenges their own beliefs. And yet, she continues, because awakening is not about pleasing others. It's about aligning with truth through the park. It's about stepping into her identity with courage and clarity, even if the path is unfamiliar. This process also reveals how much power she has been taught to give away. She may have been taught to seek approval from authority figures, to base her self-worth on relationships or achievements, or to keep the peace even when it meant sacrificing her voice. Now, the park, she reclaims that power, not by fighting the world, but by choosing herself again and again. She learns to trust her intuition, her vision, her values. She learns that she is allowed to define her own version of success, beauty, love, and purpose. Breaking cultural conditioning also means allowing herself to dream bigger. Where once she may have limited herself due to what others would say, she moves forward knowing that fear of judgment is not a reason to stay small. She becomes her own standard. She dresses how she wants, speaks how she feels, and lives how she chooses, not recklessly, but consciously. Each choice becomes a statement. I am no longer bound by the old rules. As she rises, she becomes a mirror for others. Her freedom shows other women what is possible. Her courage becomes contagious. Her authenticity creates a ripple effect. She no longer has to explain or defend her awakening. Her life becomes the explanation. She becomes a quiet revolution, not by shouting, by showing. In shedding what no longer fits, she becomes more of who she truly is. And in doing so, she doesn't just reclaim her life. She redefines the legacy she will leave behind. The world may not change overnight. With every conditioned layer she releases, a new world quietly begins to take shape. When one woman awakens, she doesn't rise alone. Her awakening radiates outward, touching lives beyond her own. This is the ripple effect of empowerment. A single shift in awareness can become the catalyst for transformation in her family, her friendships, her workplace, and her community. She becomes a living example of what it means to step into truth, and without even trying, she gives others permission to do the same. This is not because she teaches through words, but because she leads through presence. Her clarity, confidence, and conviction silently invite others to reflect on their own potential. Empowerment, when genuine, is never self-contained. When a woman begins to trust herself, to speak up, to choose from a place of inner strength, she sends a powerful message to those around her. Through the park, it is possible. Daughters raised by such a woman grow up knowing that their voice matters. Sons raised by her learn to respect strength in all its forms, not just physical, but emotional and intellectual. Friends who witness her evolution feel inspired to begin their own journey. Colleagues see a new standard for integrity and courage. She doesn't need to convince or convert anyone. She simply lives in alignment with herself through the park, and that alignment influences others more deeply than force ever could. The ripple effect often begins in small ways, running the park. Perhaps it's a conversation with a sister who's struggling. Perhaps it's a decision to set boundaries with a parent or leave an unhealthy environment. These choices might seem personal, but their impact is far-reaching. They show others that change is not only possible, but necessary. That self-respect is not selfish. Choosing yourself is not abandonment. It is leadership. Every time she stands in her truth, she teaches others how to do the same, running through the park. Empowerment is also deeply contagious because it challenges fear. Most people live within limitations not because they lack ability, but because they are afraid of being judged, rejected, or misunderstood. When a woman awakens and begins to walk through her fears, she lights a path for others. She shows them that fear can be faced, that discomfort can be survived, and that freedom is worth the risk. She becomes a lighthouse not by being perfect, but by staying lit when the storm surrounds her. Beauty of this ripple effect is that it does not require status or a platform. You do not have to be famous or wealthy to influence others. A mother raising her children with love and boundaries, a teacher who encourages students to think critically, a friend who listens without judgment. Each of these women is creating change, and the woman who chooses to heal herself, to break cycles, to dream again after being told not to, she is rewriting the future. Even in the face of resistance, an empowered woman stays grounded through the park. She knows that not everyone will understand her journey. She knows that some will feel threatened or uncomfortable by her growth. But she also knows that staying small for the comfort of others is not her responsibility. Her responsibility is to live fully so that others may see what it means to do the same. Over time, these ripples become waves. One woman's courage becomes a movement. The park. Her daughter starts a business. Her friend leaves a toxic relationship. Her niece goes back to school. Her community begins to shift because she demanded change, not because she embodied it. Empowerment, when rooted in authenticity, creates a legacy. And so the world changes quietly, steadily, and profoundly because one woman chose to wake up. She chose to no longer be defined by fear, no longer settle for silence, and to no longer apologize for her power. She chose herself, and in doing so, she chose a better world for all. An awakened woman carries within her a rare and powerful balance, the ability to lead with both compassion and courage. These two qualities, often seen as opposites, become harmonious within her. Compassion gives her the depth of heart to understand others, while courage gives her the strength to speak truth and take action when necessary. This balance is not something she inherits, it is something she cultivates, often through trials, pain, healing, and growth. In a world that often rewards dominance and views vulnerability as weakness, her ability to embody both strength and softness becomes revolutionary. Compassion is not passivity. It is the strength to feel deeply without losing clarity. So it is the wisdom to hold space for others while maintaining one's own emotional boundaries. An awakened woman understands that compassion begins with herself. She no longer abandons her needs to care for others. She no longer pours from an empty cup. Instead, she nurtures herself, knowing that true compassion cannot exist without self-respect. This self-compassion becomes the root of how she relates to others. She becomes less reactive, more understanding, and more grounded. She listens not to respond, but to connect. She sees beyond surface behavior and recognizes the wounds others carry. She also knows where to draw the line, because compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. Courage, on the other hand, is about fearlessness. It isn't about moving forward despite fear. An awakened woman does not wait to feel ready or unafraid. She acts when her values are on the line, when her truth needs to be spoken, and when silence would cost her integrity. Courage shows up in the conversations she used to avoid. It shows up in the decisions she makes, even when they are unpopular. It shows up in the way she refuses to shrink herself for anyone else's comfort. Her courage is not loud or aggressive. It is steady, calm, and clear. She does not dominate others to feel strong. She stands firmly in herself and invites others to do the same. Together, passion and courage form a leadership style that is deeply human. It is not based on control, but on connection. It is not about power over people, but power with people. An awakened woman leads from within, not because she needs recognition, but because her life demands authenticity. She speaks with intention, acts with integrity, running through the park, and makes decisions that are aligned with her deeper truth, not with the pressure of external expectations. Balance also allows her to navigate conflict with grace. She does not avoid disagreement, nor does she escalate it unnecessarily. Instead, through the park, she brings presence. She is able to hold multiple perspectives while staying grounded in her own. She can challenge injustice without becoming cruel. She can call out harmful behavior without shaming others. Her leadership brings healing, division. It builds bridges, not walls. And in a world that often swings between extremes, between apathy and aggression, her centered approach becomes a quiet force of change. This balance is not always easy to maintain. She will have moments of doubt, moments where she leans too far into one side. But with awareness, calibrates. She learns from experience. She grows, and with each step, she becomes more refined, more precise, and more intentional in how she shows up. She leads not for applause, but for alignment. Not for approval, but for truth. Her compassion opens hearts. Her courage opens doors. She becomes a force that cannot be ignored. Not because she seeks power, but because she embodies it. And as more women rise into this balance of strength and sensitivity, the very definition of leadership begins to shift. It becomes more inclusive, more humane, and more effective. In her presence, the people feel both safe and challenged, seen and inspired. And in that space, true change begins. An awakened woman brings with her a kind of intelligence that the world has too often overlooked. One rooted in intuition, emotional depth, and visionary thinking. While the modern world has long prioritized logic, speed, and competition, she brings a necessary counterbalance. Through the park, her way of thinking isn't linear. It's connected. Her decisions are not based solely on numbers or outcomes. They're shaped by purpose, by feeling, and by a sense of what is right. She doesn't just analyze data. She reads energy, senses patterns, and understands unspoken truths. Pak, this is not, it is practical. It is the kind of wisdom that communities, families, and even organizations desperately need to thrive. Her intuition isn't guesswork. It is a refined ability to listen. To herself, to others, and to the subtle movements of life. She may not always be able to explain why something feels wrong, but her instincts guide her with precision. Where others rush, she pauses. Through the park, where others react, she reflects. Her decisions may take longer, but they are often more sustainable because they are not impulsive. They are integrated. Her wisdom comes from experience, from reflection, and from a deep connection to something greater than herself. Whether she realizes it or not, she is rebuilding society not through loud rebellion, but through quiet, conscious choices. She understands that growth is not just external. Bigger homes, higher salaries, more followers. Growth is also internal. Through the park, it's in the ability to stay calm under pressure, to communicate with honesty, to nurture relationships that matter. She knows that a home built on love and respect is more valuable than one built on appearances. She knows that a team that trusts each other will go farther than one that competes for control. Her intelligence doesn't divide. It unites. She leads not with a rigid mind, but an open heart. This intuitive way of living doesn't mean she rejects structure or logic running through the park. It means she brings something more to it. She blends the mind with the heart, the facts with the feeling, the plan with the purpose. She knows that effective leadership and meaningful progress require both precision and presence. And this is where her gift becomes transformative. In a world that often moves too fast, she brings stillness. In a world obsessed with outcomes, she reminds us of process. In a world focused on control, she introduces trust. This wisdom is especially powerful because it is often learned the hard way. Many awakened women have walked through pain, betrayal, silence, running through the park, and invisibility. It is through these experiences that their insight is sharpened. They've had to listen to themselves when no one else would. They've had to navigate spaces that were not designed for them. They've had to make peace with not being understood. But in doing so, running through the park, they've developed a compass that doesn't rely on external validation. They know who they are. They trust what they feel. And they move through life with a depth that cannot be taught in any classroom. As more women awaken and bring this intuitive intelligence in the world, the systems around them begin to shift. Workplaces become more human. Education becomes more holistic. Families become more emotionally aware. Conflict resolution becomes more about understanding than winning. This is not a dream. It is already happening. Across the globe, women are stepping into roles of influence not because they mimic traditional power, but because they bring something different, something needed, something healing. She is not rebuilding society in grand gestures. She is doing it the way she raises her children, leads her team, tends to her community, and carries herself. She is not waiting for permission. She is listening to something ancient, something sacred through the park, something true, and through that she is helping build a world that is not just more efficient, but more alive. The awakening of women is not a threat to the world. It is an invitation to evolve, to rebalance, and to grow together. For far too long, the idea of feminine awakening has been misunderstood, even feared, as if the rise of women somehow means the fall of others. At the park. But this awakening is not about creating division. It's about creating harmony. It is not about overpowering. It is about restoring balance in a world that has leaned too heavily on domination, aggression, and hierarchy. When women awaken, they do not rise to tear down. They rise to rebuild, to renew, and to reimagine what is possible for all. An awakened woman is not asking the world to make space for her out of pity or guilt. She is claiming space because she belongs there. Her awakening is not a demand. It is a declaration that her voice matters, her experiences matter, and her leadership is essential. She brings a perspective that is urgently needed in today's fractured world. A perspective that values relationships over rivalry, cooperation over conquest, and healing over harm. The systems and structures that have ignored or suppressed this energy are being asked to transform, not because women are angry, because the world can no longer afford to ignore what half of its wisdom has to offer. This awakening calls for collective growth. It invites everyone, men and women alike, to reflect on the imbalances that have been normalized. It asks men to grow alongside women, not in competition, but in partnership. It asks society to evolve beyond rigid gender roles and to honor the full spectrum of human potential. The park, when a woman awakens, she challenges others not by force, but by example. She shows that living in truth is possible, leading with compassion is powerful, and that being both soft and strong is not a contradiction, but a strength. In her awakening, she doesn't just want change for herself. She wants it for the world. She wants her daughters to walk without fear, She wants her sons to express emotion without shame. She wants a future where no one is judged by their gender, race, or background, but running by their character, but their courage and their contribution. She envisions workplaces where voices are heard, not silenced. Schools where emotional intelligence is taught, not overlooked. Communities where care is a sign of strength, not a weakness. Her vision is inclusive, expansive, and deeply rooted in justice. But this growth requires discomfort. It requires unlearning. It requires honest conversations and a willingness to examine systems, behaviors, and beliefs that have long gone unquestioned. An awakened woman does not avoid this discomfort. She walks through it. Not to blame, but to build. Not to punish, but to progress. Her growth becomes a mirror world reflecting both its potential and its resistance to change. But she remains steady because she knows that every step forward, no matter how small, is sacred. The park collective growth also means recognizing that the awakening of women benefits everyone. When women are empowered, economies improve. When women are educated, communities thrive. When women are safe, families flourish. Her freedom does not take away from others. It expands what is possible for all. Her strength does not diminish others. It supports them. Her rise is not the fall of tradition. It is the evolution of tradition into something wiser, kinder, and more complete. This is the world she is here to create, not by herself, but with those who are ready to rise with her. A world where wholeness is more valued than image, where cooperation is seen as strength, where growth is measured not just by what we produce, but by how deeply we live and connect. When a woman awakens, she doesn't just change her life. She changes the lives around her, the systems she touches, and the future she helps shape. And the world, if it's wise, will rise with her.